What is going on, you guys? I'm back. I've been very sick. I apologize. So if my throat seems a little different, that is why. Recovering still took me a little bit longer than I expected. Between uh, I don't even. We had a really bad cold. I had laryngitis and then got COVID. So what a mess. What a mess. But I am back. Mostly feeling better. Like I said, mostly still very tired, but I am trying to catch up on the readings. So thank you guys for, keeping with me, dealing with it. I apologize. I've been trying to do better this year. It's not easy. But anyway, let's get right into it. That was kind of a long intro. Alright, so we are in It All Comes Back to Control. The being out of control, which anger produces, can lead to acting out in destructive ways, both to self and others. Some of the people in prisons and jails today are good people who allowed their anger to get out of control. To them, it didn't feel like allowed, but they didn't have a choice. So I'm going to pause there for a second. Think like if you've ever heard the term seeing red or going black, right? Like in terms of like I think seeing red is probably the better term in this instance. Like you lose all control, right? Your brain just completely shuts off and it's just anger, right? And this is why, if you guys follow me on my main page on TikTok and stuff, like I've talked a little bit about this when it comes to emotional intelligence, right? And I think that's very important to bring into just in general, but when we're dealing with trauma responses, right, we have to recognize that we don't have full control, right? It's a coping mechanism. So you may not even realize that you're having a trauma response, and it just happens, and then you can look back and you're like, oh wow, like that was definitely a trauma response, right? So when I talk about emotional intelligence, it's not only being aware of those things, right? It's being aware of the four responses that people tend to have, but it's what those could look like, right? And yes, of course, every individual is going to look different. Please don't come at me. I know people say they're not traumatized by their adoption. I think it's a very individualistic and very self-aware experience, to say the least, because I didn't think that it bothered me. And reading these and looking back and telling more and more of my story, I'm like, oh shoot, like that was definitely a trauma response, like looking back on my childhood. So just being aware of that, being aware of not just for yourself but for others, and showing up for others. I'm like going on a tangent here. Showing up for others in the way that like your story may not be the same, right? You may have some different beliefs, but you can say, hey, I see you, I understand, right? Or I got you. Something so simple, but you are validating that person, right? So when it comes to feeling out of control, right, which is for many of us could be a very big spiral, especially when you're coming out of the fog, right? The fear, obligation, and guilt, it feels like a very dark spiral, right? And it's, I'm trying to like explain this in the best terms possible. It's complex PTSD with depression, And it's just extremely, extremely dark. And I think a lot of us, and I'm not saying like you could be out of the fog your entire life and still have these feelings, right? A lot of adoptees have mental health issues. We're at higher rates for things because of the rewiring of our brain, right? So while it's not an excuse, right? Like, obviously, you should be following the law. We should be emotionally intelligent in general, right? And that's not an excuse. There are some reasonings to work through for the future. Okay, sorry, I just went on a rant. Alright, continuing on. Yet it all comes down to fear. Beneath the anger are pain and fear. People get on what Rhonda Britton, the author of Fearless Living, calls the wheel of fear, a trigger that activates the fear response. This response causes them to do something, usually unconsciously, to ward off the dreaded outcome. When that doesn't work, it creates a negative feeling about themselves, which is the true fear, which leads to them doing something self-destructive behavior, such as drinking, overeating, or isolating. Does this at all sound any familiar? Fear creates a filter through which its victim views the world and renders them incapable of acting on things they would like to do. Relationships become nightmares as those caught up in the web of fear sabotage themselves by either getting angry out of proportion to the situation and making their partners wonder what kind of Alice in Wonderland world they're living in, or distancing themselves in a way which makes relationships inoperable. But who is in control in these situations? Is it the adult self, who truly wants a good relationship, or is it the scared child, who is sure everyone will leave them? It is not the adult self, then. If it is not the adult self, then it is really being in control. Not unless a person really wants to be controlled by a 2 or 3-year-old. Okay, so basically saying that like our inner child tends to control their fear, right? And I'm going to give you guys an example before ending this video on something that was self-destructive to me specifically in my, young teen, well, older teen, young adult. So I didn't go the, drugs and all that stuff. But did I harm myself in a way that like ruined my education? Yes, right? I had this great fear of, I want to be successful, right? I think everyone like wants to be successful in their own way. But then I had this really big fear, especially from like being a child, of, well, if I'm successful, will my biological parents like show up and take credit for it, right? And looking back, it's like a stupid fear, but also they tend to do that. But at the same time, adoptive parents also do that, right? Where I have my level of success. It's not where I want it to be, but it's getting there. And of course, adoptive parents, I'm not saying mine, but in general, they're like, well, I raised the child, so it's because of me. When sometimes, right, nature versus nurture, it's just what's going to happen, right? Now, you can believe in whatever entity, religion you want to believe in, but sometimes there's a path in your future, right? Where something will happen, and it's just going to be. It may not take the same direct path, or the direct career path, whatever it may be, right? Like, think of, all right, this is going to show. Think of like multiverse, like I'm trying to say this without sounding crazy. Think that there's a possibility of different timelines, right, in the universe. Think like Doctor Strange and the multiverse of the universe, or whatever it's called. How there could be different us's in different timelines, right? Think of it that way, where one little action could change everything, right? Like, the theories of time traveling, right? If you go back in time, can you change history, right? If you do one little thing, will it change the entire course of history? Think of it that way, right? That's where I'm thinking, where could or could it not be? But my ultimate I can't speak. My ultimate take on that is that no matter where you grow up, right, or who you grow up with, whether it's your biological parents or your adoptive parents or kinship or whatever it may be, nobody should be taking credit for your success other than yourself. Now, you could, of course, give inspiration. We are all inspired by someone or an action, a memory, whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that credit belongs to that individual, right? So, when, sorry guys, I'm on a tangent. So, my example, in like a better terms, right, would be, I'm going to throw in a famous adoptee, Colin Kaepernick. When people say, well, he wouldn't be famous if it weren't for his adoptive parents, that's not necessarily true, right? He's a very talented man. He got where he got because of himself. We could say the same thing about Simone Biles, another adoptee. We could say the same thing about Steve Jobs, another adoptee, right? But here's the thing. When we hear these three, just think of the three names, right? Colin Kaepernick specifically, only because he speaks out against his adoptive parents and like how they raised him. We don't hear the same when it comes to, say, Simone Biles or Steve Jobs, right? We don't hear the same when it comes to serial unalivers, right? When it comes to like Ted Bundy and Son of Sam, who all had this connection to foster care and adoption, right? So, is it that, here's my question to you guys, is it that adoptive parents, and or biological, but mostly adoptive parents, just want to control the narrative that they are these wonderful human beings that saved us, and we are where we are because of them, right? Or is it because we earned our success? Because I'm going with the latter. Just saying. Anyway, I hope you all have a terrific day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.